The elevator doors closed behind Vanessa with a soft metallic sound. For a moment, neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke. The silence inside Daniel Cole's office felt heavier than anything either of them had ever experienced. Vanessa sat across from the massive executive desk, clutching her resume tightly in both hands. Her heart pounded. Years. It had been years. Years since she had seen him. Years since that night in the restaurant. Years since she walked away from the man who once dreamed of changing the world, from a tiny apartment with a broken coffee maker and overdue bills stacked on the kitchen counter. And now, that same man owned one of the largest transportation companies in the country. Daniel slowly walked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The afternoon sunlight painted the skyline in shades of gold. He stood there quietly, his back facing her, calm, controlled, untouchable. Vanessa lowered her eyes. The contrast was painful. The last time she saw him, he wore a faded gray shirt with rolled-up sleeves and holes beginning to form near the collar. Now he wore a perfectly tailored suit worth more than several months of her salary. The room itself felt larger than her entire apartment. Daniel finally turned around. His face revealed nothing. No anger, no excitement, no bitterness, nothing. And somehow that hurt more than she expected. She had prepared herself for anger, prepared herself for accusations, prepared herself for him to tell her to leave. Instead, he simply looked at her like a professional candidate sitting for an interview, a stranger. Vanessa swallowed hard. Daniel, her voice trembled. He raised a hand gently, not rude, not aggressive, just enough to stop her. Then he walked back toward his desk and sat down. The expensive leather chair barely made a sound. He opened the folder HR had given him. Her application, her resume, her qualifications, everything except their history. For several seconds he reviewed the documents. Vanessa couldn't believe what she was seeing. He was actually reading her application, as if nothing had happened, as if they hadn't once spent nights sharing instant noodles because they couldn't afford proper meals, as if they hadn't once planned an entire future together. Daniel finally looked up. His expression remained calm, professional, controlled. Vanessa Williams. Hearing her full name from his mouth made her chest tighten. You have 7 years of administrative experience? She blinked. Was this really happening? He continued. Strong communication skills. Another page turned. Project management certification, another page. Good performance reviews from previous employers. Vanessa stared at him, completely stunned. The interview had actually started. No discussion about the past, no mention of their relationship, nothing, just business. Daniel placed the papers neatly on the desk. For the first time their eyes met, the room suddenly felt smaller, hotter, dangerously fragile. And then Daniel asked the question that completely caught her off guard. Why do you want to work for RideSync Global? Vanessa froze. Because the truthful answer had absolutely nothing to do with the company, and everything to do with him. Vanessa stared at Daniel. For a moment, she couldn't answer. Why did she want to work for RideSync Global? The truthful answer sat painfully in her chest. Because she never expected to find him here. Because she couldn't stop thinking about the portrait downstairs. Because seeing his face again had reopened wounds she thought had healed years ago. But none of those answers belonged in an interview. She forced herself to speak. I've followed RideSync's growth for years. Daniel nodded. No emotion, no reaction, just listening, Vanessa continued. I admire what the company has become. Daniel folded his hands together. What exactly do you admire? The question sounded simple, but something about the way he asked it made her nervous. Vanessa looked away. The innovation, that's all? His voice remained calm, professional, dangerously calm. Vanessa felt her stomach tighten. No. Daniel waited. The silence stretched. Finally, she said softly, I admire the person who built it. For the first time, something changed in Daniel's expression. Not much. Just enough for her to notice. A flicker. Gone almost instantly. Daniel leaned back in his chair. Outside the window, helicopters crossed the skyline. The city moved. The world moved. But inside the office, time felt frozen. Then Daniel asked quietly, Do you know how many people told me rides would fail? Vanessa looked up. The question caught her off guard. Daniel's eyes drifted toward the city. Investors. He paused. Friends. Another pause. Family. His jaw tightened slightly. And people I trusted. Vanessa's heartbeat quickened. She knew where this conversation was going. Daniel knew it too. Neither of them wanted to say it first. Finally, Daniel looked directly at her. The distance between CEO and applicant suddenly disappeared. For one brief moment, it was just Daniel and Vanessa again. The same two people from years ago. The same two people from the tiny apartment. The same two people whose future once seemed certain. Then Daniel asked the question he had carried for years, the question that had haunted him through sleepless nights. The question that had followed him through every success, every milestone, every victory, every lonely celebration. His voice dropped almost to a whisper. Why did you leave? Vanessa felt the air leave her lungs. There it was. The question. The one she had feared since she stepped into the building. The one she had rehearsed answers for 1,000 times. Yet none of them felt good enough, her eyes filled with tears. Daniel didn't look away. He needed the truth. Not excuses, not apologies. The truth. Vanessa lowered her gaze to her hands. Her fingers trembled. For several seconds she couldn't speak. Then finally, she whispered. Because I was scared? Daniel remained silent. Vanessa swallowed hard. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I was tired of struggling, Daniel. The words felt like knives. I was tired of wondering how we'd pay rent. More tears followed. Tired of watching you work all day and still come home with nothing. Daniel listened quietly. Every word landed harder than the last. Vanessa wiped her eyes. I loved you. Her voice cracked. I really did. Daniel's expression didn't change, but his hands tightened beneath the desk. Vanessa continued. And that's what made it worse. The room fell silent again. Daniel slowly stood. He walked toward the giant windows overlooking the city. His back faced her. Vanessa could no longer read his face, and that terrified her, because she had no idea what he was thinking, no idea what he was feeling, no idea what was coming next. Daniel stood silently before the floor-to-ceiling windows. His hands rested in his pockets. The city stretched endlessly below. Thousands of people moving through their lives. Thousands of stories. Thousands of choices. And yet, the choice Vanessa made years ago still lingered between them. Behind him, Vanessa struggled to hold herself together. The tears wouldn't stop, not because Daniel was rich, not because he was successful, but because she was finally facing a truth she had spent years avoiding. A truth she hated admitting. Daniel spoke without turning around. Scared of what? Vanessa closed her eyes. The answer came immediately, but saying it out loud hurt. Scared that nothing would ever change. Silence. I kept telling myself to be patient. Her voice shook. I kept telling myself things would get better. Daniel stared out at the skyline, listening, waiting. Vanessa continued. I believed in you at first. The words hung heavily in the room. I really did. A tear rolled down her cheek. I believed every presentation, every business plan, every late-night conversation, every promise, every dream. She remembered them all. Daniel finally turned around. His expression remained unreadable. Vanessa lowered her head, ashamed. You'd stay up all night working. She laughed bitterly through her tears. I remember waking up at 3 in the morning and seeing that laptop glow across the room. A painful smile crossed Daniel's face. The memory was familiar, too familiar, Vanessa continued. You never stopped. No. Daniel's voice was quiet. I didn't. Another silence followed. Then Vanessa whispered, That's part of why I got angry. Daniel frowned slightly. What do you mean? Vanessa looked up. For the first time, she met his eyes directly. Because no matter how hard things got, her voice cracked. You never stopped believing. Daniel said nothing. You always had hope. Another tear fell, and I didn't. The confession left her lips before she could stop it. Years of guilt poured out. I was weak. Daniel looked away. The room felt painfully honest now. No masks, no pretending, no just truth, Vanessa continued. My family kept asking questions. Daniel remained silent. When is he going to get a real job? How long are you going to wait? What if his company never works? Each question sounded louder now than it had back then. Each one carried fresh shame. I started listening to them. Daniel's jaw tightened. Not in anger. In disappointment, Vanessa noticed, and it hurt because disappointment felt worse than rage. I know, Daniel said quietly. The word shocked her. You know? Daniel nodded. I knew they didn't believe in me. Vanessa froze. Daniel walked slowly toward the desk. I just didn't know you joined them. The sentence hit like a punch. Vanessa immediately looked down, unable to meet his eyes. Because he was right. That was exactly what happened. She hadn't simply stopped believing. She had joined the people doubting him, the people laughing at him, the people waiting for him to fail. The realization hurt more than anything else. Daniel sat down again, calm, controlled. But there was pain in his eyes now, real pain, the first genuine emotion she'd seen from him all day. Then he asked quietly, Do you remember the night you left? Vanessa's stomach dropped. Of course she remembered. How could she forget? The restaurant, the argument, the humiliation, the words she wished she could erase forever. Daniel didn't wait for an answer. I remember every second. The room became silent, dangerously silent. Vanessa felt tears building again. Daniel looked directly at her. For the first time, the successful CEO disappeared, and the man she once loved stood in his place. I wasn't upset because you left. Vanessa blinked. Daniel's voice remained steady. I was upset because you never gave me a chance. The words shattered something inside her. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Daniel continued. I could have accepted failure. He paused. I could have accepted losing everything. Another pause. But hearing you say you'd rather be with anyone else than me, his voice faltered for the first time. Just slightly. That stayed with me. Vanessa covered her mouth. Tears streamed down her face because she knew exactly what he was talking about. The homeless man comment, the cruel joke, the public humiliation, the worst moment of her life, and she couldn't take it back. No amount of apologies could erase it. No amount of regret could undo it. The room felt heavy, almost unbearable. Daniel looked away, toward the skyline again, toward the city he had conquered, the city he once dreamed about. Then he said something Vanessa never expected, something that completely stunned her. I almost quit after that night. Vanessa's eyes widened. Daniel's gaze remained fixed on the horizon. RideSync was 2 weeks away from shutting down. The room went completely still. Vanessa stared at him, speechless, because for the first time, she realized she had never known what happened after she walked away, and what Daniel was about to reveal would change everything. The office became silent. Vanessa couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't even blink. RideSync was 2 weeks away from shutting down. The company now worth billions. The company occupying an entire skyscraper. The company everyone admired. Daniel stood quietly near the windows. His reflection stretched across the glass. For several moments he said nothing, as if deciding whether or not to continue. Then he finally spoke. I never told anyone this. Vanessa listened carefully. Daniel's voice remained calm. But beneath that calmness was something else. Pain. Old pain. The kind that never completely disappears. The week after you left, he paused, was the worst week of my life. Vanessa lowered her eyes. Guilt immediately flooded through her. Daniel continued. I stopped answering calls. I stopped attending meetings. I stopped caring. Vanessa looked up. The confession shocked her. Daniel had always been the strongest person she knew. The idea of him giving up felt impossible. Yet here he was, admitting it. I spent days sitting in that apartment. A bitter smile crossed his face. The same apartment you hated. Vanessa felt tears returning. Daniel continued. I'd wake up, look at my laptop, and then close it. The words felt heavy, painfully heavy. Investors were rejecting me. Suppliers wanted payments. The company account was almost empty. Another pause, and then you left. The room became silent again. Daniel walked slowly toward his desk. His eyes drifted toward the city below. Thousands of lights beginning to appear as evening approached. At some point, he sighed softly. I convinced myself everyone else was right. Vanessa's chest tightened. Everyone else. The investors. The critics. The doubters. Her, especially her. Daniel sat down, his hands folded together. Then he laughed softly, not because anything was funny, because the memory felt unreal now. One morning I opened my email. Vanessa remained silent. There were 17 rejection emails, 17. In one morning, Daniel shook his head. I remember staring at the screen. Another pause. Then I closed the laptop. Vanessa could barely breathe. Daniel's story was nothing like she imagined. She had always assumed success came naturally after she left, that he simply worked harder and everything improved. Reality was much uglier, much harder, much more painful. Daniel looked directly at her. That was the day I decided to quit. Vanessa froze, completely. Quit? Daniel nodded, as though he could still see that version of himself. The broken version, the exhausted version, the version nobody believed in. I packed everything. The business plans, the projections, the investor decks. Everything. His voice softened. I was ready to walk away. Vanessa stared at him, speechless. Because if he had quit that day, RideSync would never exist. This office wouldn't exist. The skyscraper wouldn't exist. None of it. Daniel leaned back slightly, then smiled, a real smile this time. Small, almost nostalgic. Then something happened. Vanessa waited. The suspense felt unbearable. Daniel looked toward the skyline again. I got a phone call. A phone call? Daniel nodded. From an investor. Vanessa frowned. Another rejection? Daniel shook his head. He wanted a meeting. The room became silent. A real meeting, not 5 minutes. Not 10 minutes, a real meeting. Vanessa listened carefully. Daniel continued. He told me something I'll never forget. His eyes narrowed slightly, as if replaying the moment, he said. Daniels paused. Most people quit when nobody believes in them. Another pause. The dangerous people are the ones who keep going anyway. Vanessa felt chills. Daniel smiled again. He invested. The words landed heavily. He wasn't the biggest investor. He wasn't the richest investor, but he was the first person who believed. Vanessa nodded slowly, understanding. Daniel continued. That investment kept RideSync alive. Another pause. 30 days later, we secured another investor, and another, and another. The company slowly began to grow, slowly, painfully, one step at a time. Years of sacrifice, years of failure, years of rejection. until eventually, everything changed. Daniel's gaze drifted across his office, the awards, the city, the empire, the success, everything. Then he looked back at Vanessa. And the funny thing is, his voice softened. The day RideSync finally became profitable, he paused. I wasn't thinking about the money. Vanessa's heart sank. Because she already knew where this was going. Daniel looked directly into her eyes. I was thinking about you. The room became completely silent. Vanessa felt tears rolling down her face again. Not because Daniel still loved her, not because he hated her, but because she finally understood. She had never been just another breakup. She had been part of the story, part of the pain, part of the reason he kept going, and that realization hurt more than anything. Daniel looked down briefly, then closed her file, the interview file, the resume, the paperwork, everything. When he looked back up, his expression had changed. Not softer, not harder, just different. As if he had finally said what he needed to say. Then he asked a question Vanessa wasn't prepared for, a question that would change the direction of the entire conversation. Tell me honestly, Vanessa. He paused. If RideSync had failed, his eyes locked onto hers. Would you be sitting here today? Vanessa froze. The question hung in the air, heavy, uncomfortable, impossible to avoid. Daniel's eyes remained fixed on Vanessa. If RideSync had failed, he paused. Would you be sitting here today? Vanessa felt her throat tighten. No answer came, not immediately, because the truth wasn't simple. The truth was messy, painful, embarrassing. Daniel waited, patiently. He wasn't looking for the perfect answer. He was looking for an honest one. Finally, Vanessa lowered her eyes. No. The word barely escaped her lips. Daniel nodded slowly, as though he had expected it. Vanessa wiped her tears. I probably wouldn't. Silence. The honesty hurt, but lying would hurt even more. Daniel looked out the window. The city lights were beginning to illuminate the skyline. For several moments, neither spoke. Then Vanessa continued. I didn't come here because you're rich. Daniel said nothing. I didn't even know this was your company. Still silence. I came because I needed a job. Another pause. And because I thought my life would be different by now. Daniel finally looked back at her. Something in that sentence caught his attention. Vanessa laughed bitterly, not because anything was funny, because life sometimes had a cruel sense of irony. The man I left you for? Daniel remained silent. I thought he had everything. The room grew still, Vanessa continued. The expensive suits, the money, the connections, the lifestyle. Everything she thought mattered, everything she thought would make her happy. Her eyes filled with tears again. It didn't last. Daniel listened quietly, no judgment, no satisfaction, no revenge, just listening. Vanessa shook her head. He wasn't who I thought he was. The confession felt humiliating, but she continued anyway. He cared about appearances. He cared about status. He cared about what people could do for him. Another tear rolled down her face, and when things became difficult, she laughed softly. He left. Daniel looked down briefly. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. The man she chose for security had abandoned her. The man she abandoned had built an empire. Life had a strange way of balancing accounts. The room fell silent again. Then Daniel stood. Vanessa immediately became nervous. Was this the end? Was he about to reject her? Tell security to escort her out? Tell HR to withdraw her application? Daniel walked around the desk, picked up her file, and opened it one final time. Vanessa's heartbeat quickened. Every second felt longer than the last. Daniel reviewed several pages, then closed the folder, his decision made, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke.
Your qualifications are strong.
Vanessa blinked. The statement caught her completely off guard. Daniel continued. Your experience matches what we're looking for. She stared at him, confused, unsure where this was going. Daniel placed the file on his desk, then said the last thing she expected. HR will continue the hiring process. Vanessa froze. What? Daniel nodded. You heard me. The room seemed to spin. She couldn't believe it. After everything, after the humiliation, after the heartbreak, after all the years. He was still considering her application? Daniel walked back toward the window. What happened between us? He paused. Has nothing to do with your qualifications. Vanessa stared at him, speechless. Daniel's voice remained calm, professional. The company deserves the best candidate. Another pause. If HR believes that's you, then you deserve the opportunity. Tears filled Vanessa's eyes again. This time for a different reason, because she suddenly realized something. Daniel wasn't trying to punish her. He wasn't trying to embarrass her. He wasn't trying to get revenge. He had already won years ago. The moment he refused to quit. The moment he kept going. The moment he built RideSync. Daniel turned toward her, his expression softer than before. Not warm, not cold, just honest. We can't change the past, Vanessa. The words landed gently, but we can decide what we do next. Vanessa nodded slowly, unable to speak. Daniel glanced toward the office door. A signal that the meeting was over, the interview was over, the conversation was over, at least for today. Vanessa stood. Her legs felt weak. She picked up her purse, her resume, the pieces of her life, then slowly walked toward the door. Just before reaching it, she stopped, turned around, and looked at Daniel one final time. "Thank you." Daniel simply nodded, no smile. No dramatic speech, just a nod. Vanessa opened the door and stepped outside. The executive floor felt strangely quiet. She took several steps down the corridor, trying to process everything that had happened. Then she heard voices. Two senior executives standing near a conference room. They hadn't noticed her. "If she gets approved," one of them said. "She'll be reporting directly to Mr. Cole." Vanessa froze. Her eyes widened. Directly to Daniel? Every day, the executives continued walking. Unaware they had just changed everything, Vanessa stood motionless in the corridor, her heart pounding. Because for the first time since entering RideSync, she realized the story between her and Daniel might not be over after all. Vanessa stood frozen in the corridor, her heart hammered against her chest. The two executives disappeared around the corner, but their words remained. She'll be reporting directly to Mr. Cole, directly to Daniel, every day, every meeting, every project, every conversation. The thought alone made her stomach twist. Part of her wanted to leave the building immediately. Part of her wanted to stay. Neither option felt easy. Slowly, she walked toward the elevators. The executive floor seemed quieter now. The confidence she carried into the interview was gone, replaced by uncertainty. Questions, regret, hope, fear, all mixed together. The elevator doors opened. Vanessa stepped inside. As the doors closed, she looked back one final time toward Daniel's office. Then the elevator began descending. Inside his office, Daniel remained standing by the window. The city lights now stretched endlessly beneath the darkening sky. The meeting was over, but his mind wasn't. For the first time in years, he had seen Vanessa again, and somehow it felt both easier and harder than he expected. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Daniel turned. "Come in." The door opened. A woman entered, late 30s, sharp suit, confident posture, executive presence. This was Rachel Morgan, RideSync's chief operating officer, one of the first people who believed in Daniel's vision. One of the people who helped build the company from the ground up. Rachel noticed the file on his desk, Vanessa's file. Then she looked at Daniel. "How did it go?" Daniel remained calm. "Fine." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "Fine." Daniel nodded. "She's qualified." Rachel stared at him for several seconds, then slowly sat down. The room became quiet, dangerously quiet. Finally, Rachel spoke. "You know who she is." It wasn't a question. Daniel looked out the window. "Yes." Rachel folded her arms. "And you're still considering hiring her?" Daniel said nothing. Rachel's expression hardened slightly. Because unlike Vanessa, Rachel knew the full story. She remembered those early years, the failures, the struggles, the sleepless nights. She remembered watching Daniel drag himself through some of the darkest months of his life. Months that came after Vanessa left. Rachel leaned forward. "Daniel." Her voice softened. "I watched what that woman did to you." Silence. Daniel remained calm. Rachel continued. "I watched you nearly destroy yourself trying to recover from it." Another silence. Then Daniel finally spoke. "People make mistakes." Rachel stared at him. "Some mistakes cost more than others." The room grew quiet again. Daniel didn't argue, because part of him knew she was right. Rachel stood, walked toward the office door, then stopped, and delivered a warning that immediately changed the atmosphere. "If you hire her," she turned toward him, "make sure you're doing it for the company." Daniel's expression didn't change, but something about the warning lingered. Rachel opened the door, then paused one final time. "Because not everyone here will be happy about it." The door closed, leaving Daniel alone. Meanwhile, Vanessa stepped out of the building. The cold evening air hit her face. Cars moved through the busy streets. People hurried along sidewalks. The world continued normally. Yet nothing felt normal anymore. Her phone vibrated. A message from Melissa. "How did it go?" Vanessa stared at the screen, then slowly typed, "You won't believe who interviewed me." Almost instantly. "What happened?" Vanessa looked up at the massive RideSync Global headquarters towering above her, the same building she had entered that morning as a job applicant, the same building she left carrying years of unresolved emotions. Then she typed, "Daniel remembers everything." She hit send.